Hello, everyone. And we're here to speak about, and not necessarily people's most favorite topic. How do you like that? It's called accountability, responsibility. And I smile because I say to myself, I speak to myself just as I speak to you, and we speak to each other. I've asked this question many times to myself and to others. How many of us want to be accountable? If we had our choice, if it was up to us, would we be accountable? Would we feel responsible to anyone? Now, obviously, we live in a world where we need to make a living, and we have other needs. As a result, those needs become deterrents and incentives to be accountable. Listen, you're working for someone, and if you're going to lax off on your job, you may lose your job. You may lose your income. There'll be penalties. If each of us follows our own heart's desires, there is law enforcement. There's a thing called shame. There's a thing called being accepted. Many people, that's a big, strong deterrent, not to just follow your own heart, but to be accountable and answer. But those are all superimposed forces. That doesn't mean it would be natural. Which means left out to your own, and you did not need anybody, and nobody was looking, how would you behave? I'm sure some of you thought about this. Just to drive the point home, normal people like you and I, who never thought they were capable of certain horrendous behavior, are known to have been trapped, let's say in an avalanche. They're doing mountain climbing or a skiing trip, and they're suddenly stuck and they have no food. There's a small group of them, and this is documented. I don't even want to repeat it, that's how horrible it is, but there's documented incidents of normal people who in their life would never have imagined will turn on each other because of hunger. And when a person is weak and bleeding, they may not kill the person outright. Even that has also happened. But they'll definitely wait till that person dies. And then cannibalism. So if someone asked you, was it possible for you, trapped, to stoop to such a level? Most people would say no. But then think again. How do you know? How do you know what hunger does to you, to the brain, when you're desperate? And there are people who were tortured or feared to be tortured during the Nazis or during Soviet Union, Stalin. And they turned on each other. Yes, they became informers, capos and others for their own self-interest. Even though at the end they may have been killed too. And then others, absolutely not. No matter what you did to them, they would not turn on someone else. They'd die before they let someone else die for their benefit. So it's not so simple to just say, oh yeah, you know what? I know myself so well. So obviously these are extreme circumstances, extreme situations. But it just goes to show you how much do we really know about ourselves. How much, God forbid, we should ever be tested. No one should ever be tested. How do we know what we'd be like under torture, under extreme circumstances? So we'll go back to the question of accountability. How many people just want to be accountable? Think about it. If you knew you'd never get caught, no one ever saw you, you'd never be embarrassed, how would you behave? So Oscar Wilde, in his classical, cynical side, wrote a book called The Portrait of Dorian Gray, precisely about this theme, about a guy, Dorian Gray, a very handsome man. And then as he began to get older, and he had a lot of fun, and he enjoyed his life, he was very popular among everyone. And then as he got a little older, I guess when he saw his first wrinkle or first gray hair, he started getting depressed. He's going to lose his looks and lose his age and his vitality, his virility. So of course, who does he bump into? The famous guy, the angel of darkness, the devil. And they make a deal. The devil says to him, he sees his weak spot, you give me your soul and I'll give you your looks. And you will always remain young and dynamic and charismatic. And what happens? He paints a portrait called the portrait of Dorian Gray, a portrait. The devil says, all the things that happen to you in your life are going to be projected onto the portrait. The portrait will get old. You will remain young. And the portrait is locked up in the attic in the top of his home. And he never goes to look at it, obviously. But when you get it, what those that look at the portrait see, it gets uglier and uglier. Because he, knowing that he can live forever and remain young, takes full advantage, has no conscience. And what does a person without a conscience do? Unscrupulous. Hurting people, abusing people, taking advantage. His whole life is a miserable, making other people miserable. While he maintains his looks and his charisma and his vitality, and everyone thinks he's One day, finally, years pass, and he's so curious to see what that portrait looks like. What does he really look like? So he goes up to the attic, peeks in, and is shocked. He sees the most grotesque old man. Besides the age, you can see the evil in his face. Every wrinkle, everything, every sin and the crime that he perpetrated is engraved in his face. And he simply can't tolerate it, so he takes a knife and cuts up the painting. And of course, as he does that, he's cutting himself up. And when he stabs himself to death, and the painting turns into the beautiful Dorian Gray. This is one of many stories. So how would we be like if you were told you have no consequences? That's a hypothetical question. So interestingly, you may think, 1 second, this is for people who live in the wild, for people who are undisciplined, who didn't grow up in homes with Torah mitzvahs, people who don't have Kabbalah's El Machal Shamayim, it's called fear of God. So you would think. So there's a Talmud that actually says no. Not in our 21st century. In the times of the Talmud, of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, no less, one of the greatest sages, on his deathbed, the Talmud describes what he told his students on his deathbed. And what does he say to them? He says, Halavai. You all know what Halavai means? Halavai means, may it be. It's even more than that. It's a Jewish word, it's a Hebrew word. Halavai. May it be that you should have Meira Shamayim, that you should fear heaven, stand in awe of heaven as much as you fear other human beings. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the great sage, is saying this to sages, not to peasants, not to people walking around the streets, no education, undisciplined, wild people. To the greatest of the great. Because that's the world in which we live. God concealed His presence in this world, and as such, even the person who is absolutely God-fearing has to work hard at reminding themselves of that. Lev Yitzchak Berditchever, the great Hasidic Rebbe, once made an announcement on a certain Tuesday in Berditchev. He wants everybody to come and gather into the shul, into the synagogue. Men, women, children. So everybody, the Levi Yitzchak, the Hilik Berditchever says, the Holy Berditchever says this, so they thought there must be a decree in heaven. Okay, they closed their stores, the people left their homes, everybody came. Men, women, and children all came to the shul. And they're waiting 3 o'clock in the afternoon, middle of a Tuesday, middle of nowhere. It wasn't a holiday, no special day. They're anticipating, Levi Yitzchak Berditchever comes out, he bangs on the table, on the bima, on the platform, and says he wants to let everyone know that there's a Rabbeinu Shalel. He wants to let everyone know there's a God in this world. And that was it. That was the punchline. Why? Because you can grow up in a very religious and traditional home. That doesn't mean to say you have a God in your life. It means you have rituals in your life. Rituals that your parents gave you. To have a God in your life takes work. Because we live in a world that is constantly denying God's existence. We live in a world where God is not visible. We live in a world, as Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, we fear humans more than we fear God. The Holy Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, one of the things that shaped his whole life was on his father's deathbed. Interestingly, he could contrast to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So his father told the Holy Baditcher when he was a little boy, his name was Yisrael, he told him, remember, fear nothing but God. And forever, that's what became engraved in his heart, and he had no fear. He was fearless. And I guess when you hear something from your father at that young, impressionable age, it changes your whole life. My grandmother used to tell me, I had an uncle who was killed in a car accident several years ago. His name was Yosef Yitzchak. They called him Fitzi. So when he was a little child, he was once asleep, and there was a thunderstorm middle of the night. The thunderstorm, so he came running to his mother. He says, he's afraid, he's scared. She said, what are you scared of? And I'm scared of the thunder, it's such loud noises. So his mother says to him, my grandmother says to her boy, there's nothing to be afraid of, Yosef, it's only of God. He goes back to sleep. Okay, thunderstorms tend to come and go, and they came back. Again it's thundering. Again he's running out of his bed to his mother. He's afraid. His mother says, I told you. He says, what are you afraid of? He says, I'm afraid of God. So sometimes it comes in the shape of thunder, and sometimes it comes in the shape of... So we have to wonder, what are we afraid of? I grew up in a traditional home. Thank God my home is not dogmatic. And it wasn't driven by fear, it was driven by love. I don't know what kind of life I'd have. I wouldn't know what kind of impact it would have had it been done in no other way. But I know many others have not had such homes. And when you get a little older, you start thinking for yourself. If you do think for yourself, you start wondering, am I this way because this is godly, or this is because my parents taught me this? And what other option do I have? Or am I this way because maybe the fear of punishment, the fear of change? How many people really can be nonconformists and just break away from their parents? And this has nothing to do with religion. You can be non-religious and also be a conformist. Conformity is the nature of the beast. Not easy to just defy what you grew up with. That's why the big commandment mitzvah to Abraham, the first mitzvah to a Jew, was Lech lecha ma'atzecha malatecha mebeis avicha, leave your homeland, the place of your birth and the home of your parents. And he was 75 years old at the time. And still you need to be told that. It's not so simple to leave your past. The Baal Shem Tov has a very beautiful interpretation. We say in the Shemoneh Esrei, in Amidah, every day. We say in the beginning, Elokeinu, V'Elokei Aviseinu, Elokei Avram Yitzchak V'Yankov. Our God, the God of our parents, and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The question is, it should have been the other order. Chronologically, first it was God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then it's the God of our parents. Then it's our God. So it should have said, Elokei Avram Yitzchak Yankov, Elokei Aviseinu, Elokeinu. That's the way it came to us. Why do we start backwards? And his answer is simple, but extremely profound. He says, because the goal is that you should have a relationship that it's your God, my God, not the God of your parents alone and the God of your grandparents and of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So education-wise, chronologically, it begins obviously in your home. Who teaches you first about God? Your parents. And they teach you there was Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. So it begins from there. But when you become of age, where you can think on your own, you have to own your relationship. No longer can you just write, I'm honoring and worshiping the God of my parents. Now it's to become my God. Elokeinu. And we say it even every day in every blessing we make. If we think about what we're saying and not saying it just lip service, you say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. Blessed are you, God, Hashem Elokeinu, our God, melech ha'olam, the King of the universe. And then you say, on shahakal niyeh b'dvari, on a drink of water, or bayir min mezainis, on a piece of cake, or lechem min haaretz, or wine. Every food has its own blessings. But they all begin with the same universal, global opening. Hashem Elokeinu. What does that mean, Hashem Elokeinu? Think about it. Isn't that redundant? Just say, bless you, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu. You're saying it three different ways. Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. What would be wrong if you said, Baruch atah Hashem melech ha'olam? So what do you need Elokeinu for? So those that don't know Hebrew, in general, make the mistake, and they think all these names of God are just redundant. I've even seen Bible critics who say there must be several authors of the Torah because they're different names for God. So there must be different. This one, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Hashem. This one knew Elokeinu, this one knew Adnai, this one knew Tzvokis, this one knew Kael, Shaddai, and so on. The problem is, if they really look closely, there's some verses where all the several names are in one verse. So how that work exactly? So there's times, yes, but Bereshis bara Elokim, it says in the beginning God created heaven and earth. It says only Elokim. Some places it says only the Yud Kei Vav Kei. But then you have B'yemos Aseis Hashem Elokim Hashemayim V'Zaretz. And then you have in the beginning of the Ten Commandments, Anochi, I, Hashem, Elokecha. 3 different names for God. And they have to force all kinds of interpretations. The answer is very simple. If you know Hebrew, every one of them has a different name. God manifests in different ways, depending on his actions, as the Medrash says. Elokim is the God as manifests, as godliness manifests in discipline and in law and order, as Rashi says right in the beginning of the Torah. Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, as they call it, the name of 4 letters, the holy name, is compassion. Kael is chesed. Everyone has its own particular personality. Now God is beyond any name. Just like you and I, the essence of the soul doesn't have a name, but the soul can manifest in intelligence, in emotions, in love, and discipline, and humility, and all the 7 emotions, the 10 spheres. And wisdom, Chachma Bina Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chayd, Yisei, the Malchus. Not so relevant to go into the details here. And for everyone, there's a name that corresponds. So what's the significance when we say in every blessing, Hashem Elokeinu? So look also, we see it many times in the Torah, well, several times in the Torah. We just read it last week in the Haftarah. It concludes with Elijah the prophet. Similar to the story of what the golden calf, it was the time of Elijah, there was also a golden calf. And then at the end he says, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim. God is our God, God is our God. Yom Kippur, the highest point of Yom Kippur is at the end, the 5th prayer. And the end of the prayer, right when the sun is setting. We declare, we say Shema once, Baruch Shem 3 times, and then say Hashem hu Elokim 7 times. What is the meaning of these words? In English, it sounds redundant. Hashem Elokim, you'll have translations. God is our Lord, Lord is our God, God is our God. What does that mean? We're saying God is our God, and what else is God if not God? But in Hebrew, the answer is Elokim is the same gematria, the same numerical equivalent as the word Hateva, nature. So there's the God that manifests in nature, in the laws of nature, and there's the God beyond nature, transcendence. As opposed to Spinozian pantheism, where God is nature and nature is God, we have what the sages say, God is nature, but nature is not God. God is much more than that. So we say in every blessing, even when you take a drink of water, you say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu, you're saying not just a God up there, a God of my parents, a God of history, a God of our great-grandparents, of Abraham. No, God right here with you, in the middle of a Wednesday evening, in your workplace, in your home, in your most intimate heart and soul. God is there, not just in the synagogue on Yom Kippur or when other people are watching you. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was so adamant, and he told them, Halavai, may it be that you fear God in your life as much as you fear others. You see, when others are watching, we have shame. God is somewhere invisible. So the idea of not being accountable and not responsible is very natural to a world like ours that has an existential so-called cutoff. So it has an existential cutoff where we don't sense our source. So why should we be accountable? If we're going to be accountable, it's for an incentive, a reward, or a deterrent. I don't want to be punished, I don't want to be embarrassed, I don't want to be humiliated. But just truth because it's true, that's not such a common thing. So the nature of existence is one that is why it's so easy, and why we don't necessarily like to be accountable. In our minds, many people will say accountability is necessary. Everyone should have what we call make a cheshbon hanefesh, give an accounting. At the end of the day, before you go to sleep, at the end of the year, an elul, at the end when you like we make an accounting like in business. Accounting, you want to know where you stand. Profit versus loss. So we pay a lot of lip service to it, but the question is how accountable do we really want to be? So if the incentive is making money, even there, accountants will tell you that the worst enemy of companies is their own owners. They hire accountants not to listen to them. Nobody wants to hear that you made a big mistake that year that cost your company $1 million. And many people really don't want to hear it, even if it's true. I know it sounds weird, but that's how it is. Because we don't want to hear things about ourselves. It's kol negoy adam reya. Person sees all the flaws except his own flaws. But that someone can be disciplined. Listen, if you don't discipline yourself, you're not going to be efficient. You're not going to be able to run a business. So we become accountable by necessity. But accountability, just to be accountable, avde behafkere nichale is the expression. A slave wants to do whatever it wants to do. So we live in a world where, without deterrents and incentives, it's hard to imagine how many people would really be accountable. How many of us would buckle up or not pass a red light if we were not afraid that someone's going to catch us? Okay, you could say those are not cardinal sins. They're just, but it's still the same idea. So Elokim says that it should be yours, not just your parents, not just your grandparents. You have to own it. So the question is how? How would we embrace accountability then? So therefore it's so much connected to our perspective on life. So let me tell you, the Talmud says in Brachos, it says, Gam v'apu machtarte rachmana karya. You ever hear this expression? I know, it's not usually gets taught in secondary schools. In Aramaic it means a ganaf, a thief. Before he goes out to steal, he prays to God to succeed. Gamva apumachtarte rachmana karya. Before he goes out to steal, he prays to God to succeed. Now explain this one to me. One of the 10 commandments is le signev, do not steal. This person is praying to God, who told him not to steal, to help him succeed. You know, it's one thing he could ignore God or make believe God isn't there, is not watching. But to say to God, listen, I want you to help me steal, do what you told me not to do, sounds a little insane, right? It's like inviting the boss in and saying, hey, help me rip you off. So Chassidus explains that there's a thing called makif. I'll explain in a minute what that is. Amunah, faith, is makif. Makif means something that surrounds you but does not penetrate you. There are many ideas and beliefs that we have that hover above us but are not integrated. This man believes in God, and that's why he prays to God. But because his self-interest is in the way, he's able to have a paradox, a contradiction. And the faith is hovering above him, so he prays, but it doesn't affect his behavior. In other words, we all have beliefs, but to live by them and act by them is not the same thing as believing in them. Because we live in a world where when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you feel or see is yourself. The big self is always there first. You don't feel someone else's hunger and pain before your own. You can work on it and say, you know what? I have to think about someone else, not just about me. But naturally, we live in a world, it's you and you alone. When it goes to its extreme, it's called ani v'afsiyeh, me and nothing else. Everything is me, me, me. If you're a little edeler, a little more refined, the me extends. I have family, I have others I have to think about. And people are obviously real tzaddikim, real righteous people. The me gets diminished to them being servants and agents of good in this world. So the issue of how we address accountability is very much connected to how we address everything in life. Who's the center of the universe? Me or somebody else? If I'm the center of the universe, why should I be accountable? Who do I have to answer to? Unless there's an incentive, as I said, or a deterrent. But if you have a philosophy or a thinking of life that's not about me, there's a purpose to it all, then you're accountable to your purpose, to your destiny. If your soul was sent here for a reason to this world, even if no one's watching and there's no police, and no embarrassment, and there's no kehillah, community or family pressuring you or challenging you or whatever. Your soul is waiting for you. You're accountable to yourself. You can be betraying yourself can be much worse than betraying others. But how many people actually think that way? Because we are social creatures or social animals, and our impact, like Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai said so many thousands of years ago, almost 2,000 years ago, we fear humans more than we fear our destiny, than we fear God. And that seems sad, but it's also the way God intended it to be. Because who concealed the divine presence? Why don't we feel it? That's exactly the way that's the plan. That's not our doing. God concealed His presence from us, and we don't sense our purpose. And therefore, why should we feel accountable? So we have come to this week's chapter in the Torah. It's actually a double chapter. It's the last two chapters in the book of Exodus, the second book, Shmos. So the two chapters, Vayakel, Pekudei. Some years, especially leap years like last year, they're separated into two. A year like ours, they're united as one. So we read 7 readings in this joint fusion of Vayakel, Pekudei. And Pekudei is the last chapter of the book of Exodus. So how does the chapter begin? Ele Pekudei HaMishkan. These are the accounts, the accounting of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan, of the portable sanctuary that was constructed in the wilderness, which were counted at Moshe's command. So Moshe Rabbeinu basically gives an accounting, Pekudei, Asher Pokad, an accounting, an audit of all that he had gathered, this gold, silver, and copper, and all the other 12 or 15 materials that he gathered from the Jews in order to build the sanctuary. There were gold, silver, and copper. There were materials. There were different embroidery, etc. Tapestries. The Medrash says on this verse that that a person should always be given accounting, because you never know who's going to pocket a few dollars or a few pennies when they have a lot of money around them. That's what it says. Which of course begs the question, we're talking here about Moses. We're not talking about just another guy. We're not talking about someone working for Goldman Sachs or for running a hedge fund. We're talking about Moses. Raya Neman, he was a faithful shepherd. Raya Mehemna, he was trusted by God, not just by the people. God chose him to take the Jews out of Egypt, to give the Torah. I mean, what more trust to give a man the Torah? To lead the Jews. And all the Jews knew that. Why would he need to give an accounting? Who would be suspicious? And yet the question gets compounded because there's another medrash that says that Moses overheard some people gossiping and saying, look how fat he's getting, this Moses, from all that he's gathering from us. And as a result, Moses goes and gives an accounting. Now obviously, based on the accounting that he gave, it was clear that he didn't take one penny. But why would he respond to such gossip? He knew that he was not guilty. They were projecting. They were basically saying, we know that if I was sitting on so much money, I know what I would do. So for sure he's doing what I'm doing. It's called the crime of projection. We assume others doing the same thing we were capable of doing. It's usually a good sign to know where a person is standing. You see whether they're suspicious of others, because that means they think that someone's capable of that. Well, how do you know if you weren't capable? As a matter of fact, some say that many Jews did not run when the threats of Nazis started looming over Europe, because No one in their right mind could believe that there would be a race that would just get up and just massacre young men, women, and children. Why? Because if you're not capable of doing something like that, it's hard for you to imagine someone else doing it. Even when people heard live witnesses. So why did Moses have to give an accounting? Because some people were gossiping, and the Medrash tells us, because Moses understood that we live in a corrupt world, and that's why people are capable of having such suspicions. And Moses wanted to give an accounting for the record, forever and ever, and document it, would know the importance of being accountable. And it was not an ego thing for him. It wasn't pride that was hurt because someone accused him. Because number one, the money that Moses raised was not his own. He gathered it from the Jewish people. So it has nothing to do with suspicion necessarily. It's just the menschliche thing to do. If you represent a group, if you represent a community, and you gather money from them, even if everyone trusts you, you on your own volition should be offering and saying, I want to give you, who gave me the money, a din v'cheshbon, an accounting of what I used it for. And the second thing is, Adam chas al meisa yadav is an expression in the Talmud. A person is especially careful about their own property. Even in Moses, the fact that it wasn't his own, not that he, God forbid, in any malicious way, but he may not have been as actually, one may think he wouldn't have been as absolutely meticulous about every penny. Because it wasn't his own, by nature. So no one talking about malicious, obviously, but by accident. So Moses gave that accounting. And above all, as I said, it was a lesson to those people who were suspicious, because we live in a world, that's what the Medrash is saying. Those people were projecting, they were talking about the world in which we live. In this world, there's no such thing, such a tzaddik. I hear this all the time, people say, no way that he could be such a pure-hearted person. So I said, how do you know? That maybe there's one person on earth. They say, I know. Why? Because you know yourself, that's why you know. So you don't think anyone else could be different than you. There was this corrupt Rebbe who used to, extort money from people for so-called all kinds of miracles that he supposedly was doing. Later it was discovered that he would tell people about their lives, but it was after that his secretary would interview them, and he overheard the interview because he had a telephone line. And then when they would come, he'd start telling them about their lives. Oh, your wife, your mother, this. I mean, he did it smartly, so they didn't notice. So someone once came to him and said, I went to my Rebbe, a different Rebbe, and asked for a blessing, and he won't give me a blessing. So first he tried to, come to me. If you give me enough money, I'll give you the blessing. But then he saw the guy wanted the other Rebbe to give him, his Rebbe to give him. So this con artist tells him, listen, give him enough money and he'll give you the blessing. So he says, you don't know my Rebbe. My Rebbe's an honest man. Money doesn't make a difference. So he says, trust me, I know Rebbes. Enough money, he's going to take it. So he's projecting, obviously, his own, who he is. They tell the story about Elsie the Cow in the shtetl. Elsie the cow used to give milk, and they lived on the milk in the town. Now, of all days in the week, Elsie was happiest and gave the most milk on Sundays. Why? Because after Shabbos, when the maid would wash out all the pots, so the richest pots, the ones with the leftover cholent, was on Saturday night, and so that water would be left next day for the cow to drink. The cow got better water on Sunday mornings than every other morning, because it was the leftover washing from the Shabbos meal. So Sunday was special for us. But one day, so the story goes, I guess it's a Chelam story from Chelam, so everything happens there. Everything's possible in Chelam. One day, the one Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night, the maid forgets, and she pours out the water and forgets to leave it for the cow. The cow comes in the morning waiting for its milk, for its water. It gets plain water. That's it. The cow stops giving milk. Gets angry. I'm not giving milk. And the owner said, "You have to. What's going on here? Why are you so upset?" So the cow says, I'm upset at the way it made. She saw how delicious this water was, and I'm sure she drank up the water instead of giving it to me. Because the cow, in its hasagas, in its terms, thought, that the maid is like itself. It's hungry. It's good water. Now, who would drink water left over from Cholm Sunday morning? But for the cow, it was good enough. It wasn't good enough for her. So we project. So the Medrash is saying they were projecting, but describing the world in which we live. A world where, when you're around money, you're around a lot of things, and you can get away with it, maybe you won't be so accountable. So Moses said, I hear such suspicions. Let me make it very clear. And a whole chapter called Pekude, forever and ever, is documented of accountability. Even the great Moshe Rabbeinu, who's beyond suspicion, trusted by God, trusted with the Torah. God Almighty. There's no bigger trust than that. Torah's Moshe, every word. If Moses wasn't trusted, he came down from Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and taught Torah. You could say, hey, maybe he didn't hear that from God. Maybe he's distorting it. So clearly he was trusted. No one ever challenged him in that way. The few times they challenged him, it was responded to. Kirach and so on. And yet Moshe Rabbeinu went ahead and gave accountability because he wanted to show the importance of it. I remember years ago in this class, you may remember this, Lad asked me a question. Lad was a young man who came with Jeff, and they were both younger men. Yeah, men who wore younger men's clothes. Right? And I remember the first time he had never seen Chassidim before. So he looked, I was dressed, it was a weekday, but nevertheless, I have a beard, a yarmulke. He said, why do Chassidim wear this like type of uniform, is the word he used. Black, long coats, white shirts usually. I'm already assimilated because I have a blue shirt. But he did this Hadaris. And because he used the word uniform, it gave me an answer right there. So I gave him an example. I must have heard it somewhere. I don't remember where. I said to him, when they send an astronaut out to outer space, and you would meet this astronaut, and you'd ask him, why does he wear these garments? They're constricting. Has a helmet that you can't take off. Very heavy garments. So he said, of course, the reason is because in outer space it's dangerous there, and if he doesn't wear these garments, he's going to die. There's no oxygen, so he needs a helmet. He needs the protective clothing from the heat, from the cold, etc., etc. And I said, and every step, literally how he eats, when he eats, everything, he's accountable for, he's responsible for. Why? Because he's in a dangerous environment. But why is he in a dangerous environment? Why did he go to a dangerous environment? Why didn't he stay on Earth and just not have to wear all these garments and not follow all these rules? So he answered, because he's on a mission. I said, exactly, he's on a mission. He's on a mission to go to the moon, to go to outer space, whatever the reason is. And you're on a mission, the mission dictates your life, not your interests. You don't want to go on the mission, don't go on the mission. But you go on the mission, there's rules. This mission to the moon requires this type of garments and this type of behavior. So I said, the reason that there's certain garments and so on, it's cognizance. It's not the garment. Who cares about the garment per se? The garment's just a garment, hanging in a closet. It's cognizance. It's awareness that you're on a mission. It's awareness that you have a higher calling. It's awareness that you were sent here, you're not on your own. And it regulates how you dress and how you eat and how you sleep. Now, Lad was still young, but there was someone else in the room and followed up the question and said to me, and that was what I was dreading, but he said to me, so you're telling me all these Chassidim know they're on a mission? I said, that you're going to have to find out on your own. Whether they know it or not is another story. I said, sometimes astronauts get lost in space. and they don't know why they're there. But they're there. And they suddenly have these clothing on, and if they take off their helmet, maybe they may die. Or they're smart enough and they realize, maybe I just better stick with this because I don't know why, but I'm here. So many people are lost on the mission. They may have lost sight. Because remember, God sent us all to this earth, and everybody forgets their roots. Remember, the Talmud says, I discussed this a few weeks ago, that in our mother's womb, every person is taught the entire Torah. Lamdim kol haTorah kula. Everyone. And then upon birth, an angel comes, v'satri al piv, which means that's why we have this cleft, they say, over our, it's under my mustache, but let's say, Jeff, you want to demonstrate a cleft? A cleft? Yeah. Where it's almost like an indentation, the angel saying, shh. And we're made to forget. So when the child leaves the womb, the entire Torah it's studied is forgotten. Which is a weird, what is that? What is going on? First of all, why teach someone an entire Torah and then make them forget? I mean, you don't want them to know. Don't teach them to them. Secondly, in Torah, there's actually a prohibition. You're not allowed to do anything deliberately to forget Torah, because it's holy words. The Torah is God's words. And here an angel of God is coming and making them forget the Torah. What's this? So an answer, one of the main answers given, this one is in Likutei Torah from the Baal HaTanya, Parsha Shlach. I mean, there's probably other places as well. And he gives a brilliant and powerful answer. The answer is, your conscious mind is made to forget, not your unconscious. That during pregnancy, your spirit is fed. Mashbiyanese means also from the word v'savata. Is fed, is saturated, is nurtured, nourished, with all the wisdom that you will need in life. But then, you're made to forget, your conscious is made to forget. And when you study Torah later in your life, what you're doing is really reminding yourself of that which is already there. That's what's called truth. It resonates. No one gives it to you, it's there already. An example given for this, look at music. Children don't need to be taught. A child, even in its mother's womb, have been seen to react to music. Language, even speaking, is also a miracle. But there you could see at least 2-3 years old, a child mimics their parents and they start speaking, which is also a miracle. How can you start speaking suddenly at 2 years old, even if you're listening to other people speak? Clearly the child has language inside them that has to emerge. But music doesn't need any training, because there are things embedded in the neshama, in the soul, and especially music, because the neshama is made of song. Kol bal yashir nechnasim b'shir v'yetzim b'shir, which means the soul travels through song, as I discussed at other classes at length. So there are truths embedded in our psyche, in our unconscious. And when you hear it, it resonates. So good and evil, right and wrong, is not just taught to you in school, it's really inside of you. And it has to be now emerge, so someone has to show it to you. So why does God make us forget? That's the question. Because the purpose of existence is that we are partners with God in creation. And the making us forget on a conscious level is in order for us to earn our way and to be true partners, and through free will to discover the architect that has become invisible. So in a sense you could say we're born into a world where our bodies and our material selves prefer no accountability, and the purpose of existence is to find out you're on a mission and absolutely should be accountable. Not because someone's watching, or because there's police or shame. Because your soul is waiting for you. And you are on a mission no different than an astronaut. And how you behave, and how you dress, and how you walk and talk is all critical to the mission. The fact that many people wearing uniforms don't know they're on a mission, like I said before with a lost astronaut. Or a soldier who's on a war, like in Vietnam. They were fighting, they didn't know what they're fighting for. So you can be a soldier and lose sight of why we're fighting. What's the point? But we are on a mission. And mission equals accountability. Because if you knew that your soul's on a mission every morning, you'd be asking yourself, not waiting for someone to tell you, what's my mission today? And at the end of the day, you'd say, did I fulfill it? Did I live up to my calling? And have I betrayed myself? And this isn't about answering to someone else whether you're right, whether you're a good person or a bad person. It's to yourself. You have a destiny. Are you living up to it or not? Do you even know what your mission is? So accountability is not a burden, it's a gift. It's the gift of a person who knows that they're on a mission. A person with a calling is going to be accountable. A person without a calling has no interest in accountability, except, as I said, when there's no choice. Moshe Rabbeinu was on a mission. The mission was V'asuli migdash v'shachanti b'seichel. In a way, it's the mission all of us have. Build for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. As the Shalah says, b'seicham. Not I will dwell in it, in the structure, I will dwell among them, among Chol Echad, but in the hearts and souls of the people. And then, when you're on a mission like that, you give an accounting at the end of it. Where do we stand in this mission? Have you built the temple? How did you build it? Did you use, what materials did you use? So the same thing in our lives, each of us is blessed with materials, with gold, silver, copper, hopefully in abundance, with all kinds of gifts, our minds, our hearts. Because you see earlier in last week's chapter, in Vayakal actually, talks about the wisdom of the women, using their wisdom to weave, to embroider. So they contributed not just physical materials, also their gifts, their skills. And then comes the accountability. Are you using your skills for the purpose that your soul was sent to this earth? Pretty fair question, right? The problem is most of us were never even told to ask this question. They say half the answer to anything is the question. Shailas Chacham Chetzi Tshuva, the question of a wise person is have the answer. We were not taught to ask this question. And when you hear it, it seems so obvious. Remember the first time I heard it? A good question. My soul was sent on a purpose. Am I living up to it? When you start asking it, then you're starting to get somewhere. You may not have an answer so quickly, but you're at least asking. What am I doing here on this earth anyway? So most people ask that question, why am I here? But they don't. How far do they go with that? They don't even know where to go with that. Then you often meet people who can sell you every stupid what do they call it? Snake oil salesman who'll sell you any type of garbage to tell you this is your destiny. Do this, do that, do that. The Torah says your destiny is that you were sent here to earth on a mission. Each of us here has a particular unique mission. There are no two people alike, because there are no two missions alike. There's overlap, there's general principles, but each of us has unique skills. Ein deyasein shavis, ein partzefein shavis. No two people think alike, no two people look alike. That's not because they're random, that's because you have different missions, so therefore we have different personalities. Needs to fulfill that particular mission. It begins with a mission, not with your personality. God sent human beings to this earth, each of us, to do a certain, spiritualize our corner of the world. And the biggest question in life is, am I doing it? Most of us get distracted. As I said, we live in a world where me comes into the way. Then you have to make a living. Then you have friends, you have peer pressure, you have media. We have everything competing and inundating and basically occupying our psyches. And throw into the equation all our psychological fears and insecurities and all the hours we spend in therapy and all the other stuff to heal. We don't have any room for our souls to even ask that question. Why am I here? We're busy battling demons all the time. Forget about bringing light into the world. How do we bring light into the world? So accountability is not an end in itself. It's a byproduct of mission, of purpose. And that's why this chapter is so vital. And it makes you think. When I feel I'm on a mission, absolutely I want to be accountable. When I don't feel I'm on a mission, why should I be accountable? And this mission is a gift, as I said. It's a gift. You were sent. You have something unique and indispensable to contribute to this universe that nobody but you can do. That's a pretty big gift. Maybe the greatest gift of all. Not maybe, for sure the greatest gift. Because everything else is secondary. So most of us use our gifts most of us don't even use our gifts. Let's start with that. The part of the gifts we do use are usually used for scrapping out a living, trying to make ends meet, trying to get our way in this world. But the mission of bringing a higher light, a higher presence, that, as I said, is something we're not educated in. And therefore it's very natural that accountability falls on the wayside and is not necessarily our priority. So the first thing we have to know is, they should not be afraid of the fact that we don't feel the purpose. Just like Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai told his students, fear of God is not so easy. It's much easier to fear people. Because they're right around you. They look at you. They watch you. So just to know that is also somewhat consoling. It's not a justification to stay that way, but it means that's the way it was meant to be. Now begins the battle of you finding some type of deeper purpose. So on a practical level, I would say you can't go cold turkey and suddenly become this accountable, spiritual person on a mission. Find it in small ways. Every day, find a way to help somebody else. Say a kind word. Don't just do something for yourself, do it something for someone else. You start doing that, you're starting to give your soul strength in its mission in this world. And the more you do it, the more hungry you will be, and you will feel accountable. You'll feel like, what else can I do to nurture my soul and its calling and its mission in this world? That is essentially an attitude that can change your whole life if you take this attitude. The idea of fighting that darkness, finding that concealment, and discovering that particularly unique mission that each of us is charged with. So our soul is sent to this earth. We're made to forget. And then the challenge is, will you remember? Will you wake yourself up? Will you ask the question? Will you allow yourself to be carried on your mission instead of you doing whatever comes your way? So it requires a change of shift in consciousness, a shift of attitude. And when you have that shift of attitude, a lot changes. And this is directly related to relationships as well. You know, I often talk about compatibility between people. If you feel you're on a mission and your soul's on a mission, it is far, far easier to find a compatible soulmate than when it's all about you. Because when it's all about you, then you're looking for another person where they can work around you, so to speak. But if you know that you're dedicated to a higher calling, and the other person also feels that, you both have something to work with that's more than just narcissism. Most relationships fail because two people's interests collide at some point. So how do you get around that? To eliminate our interests? No. To add a dimension that's beyond it all. The third partner, God. The chuppah that hovers above us. But we all begin with ulterior motives, with incentives, as I said, deterrents. Maimonides, Rambam, in the last chapter, 10, of the Laws of Tshuva writes, based on the Gemara, the Talmud that says in Kiddushin, a person yasik that a person forever or always, the rule is, begins to serve God, begins to do Torah mitzvahs for ulterior motives. Shalei l'shma. And from ulterior motives they come to do it for no ulterior motive. And he goes on to explain that that's the nature of the beast. Children go to school, you give them incentives, candies, toys, prizes, awards. It motivates them. Why don't you just tell them it's the truth? Just do it because it's true. Human nature in this world wants some self-interest. Okay, we'll go according to what you need. The purpose of it is to teach a deeper truth, but right now, that's the incentive, so be it. A person gets a little older, the incentive is money, covet, honor, respect, awards, recognition. And then he goes on, he says, and only one man in history actually did things for no motive except, as he puts, Avram Avinu. God calls Avram Oyavi. God, Avram my beloved. God says. Because Avram Oisa Sa'emes Mepnei Shu Emes. That's the words of Maimonides. He did commit it to truth. Why? Because it was true. Everybody else is because there's some gain in this material world or in the world to come. Elam Hazar and Elam Haba. Abraham did it because it was true. We're not expected. The Talmud doesn't say, try to be like Abraham. It says, La'elam Yasik. That's how we begin, initially. Do it for whatever motive that interests you. But do something greater than yourself, even though you may gain from it personally. And Matech Shalelishma, some interpret Matech, the primus, the inner soul of the ulterior motive is really the non-ulterior motive. But you don't know that yet. So meanwhile you think you're doing it for your personal gain or reward or deterrent, when in truth the real reason is for the higher purpose. So that's the story of our lives. Practically, it begins small steps. It's small steps of wake-up calls where you start looking for signposts and you look for reminders. You wake up in the morning, the first feeling is yourself. So you say, Moida ani lifanecha. I, the ani, myself, acknowledges there's something greater than me that returned my soul to me. It's awareness. Most of us don't think about it. You jump out of bed, you're rushing or whatever, exercise, shower, breakfast, this, you get on the phone, check your messages, texting. Maidani just pauses, stops you for a moment in your tracks. Before you jump out of bed, right while you're still awake. As soon as you're aware that you're awake, say Maidani. We don't even mention God's name. You just say, I acknowledge to you for returning my soul to me. You do little things like this every moments of your day. You're shifting. What is the focus? What is the center? That's how you change your life. Small steps like that. Every mitzvah is another reminder. Before you take a piece of food in your mouth, you make a blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu, as I said before. This is not your own. It's a gift. You're thanking. There's divine sparks in the food. Lo lechem levadei yechya adam. Not on bread alone does man live. There's a spark. Motzei pi Hashem. Before you run your business, there's ways of being ethical, there's ways of not being ethical. You work hard at bringing God and soul presence in your life. The Kotzker Rebbe was asked as a child, where is God? He said, wherever you let him in. To let him in. He's there. Wherever you let him in. So it's up to you to let him in. You have to find ways to let him in. It's through acts of kindness. It's through anything that is not just me. And as you do that, what happens is the soul begins to breathe. And as it begins to breathe, it will remind you of things. It will remind you of Torahs and things you learned in your mother's womb and before. It will remind you of your destiny. And it will remind you to be accountable. And willingly, not by someone imposing it upon you. You know, I always remember sitting at a Seder table when I was a kid with my dear uncles who were one fanatic greater than the next. With all due respect to them all. And I remember my uncle was sitting, and I don't know, I was a little kid, 6 years old, 7 years old, who remembers? And I had asked the 4 questions. I was very proud of myself. Anyway, they came to drinking the second cup of wine or something like that, and I don't know, he starts hitting me on the head. He says, you have to lean. You have to lean, because one of the things you do by Seder, you lean. The 4th question, Mesubim, because it's a sign of freedom. And he's banging my head and he keeps knocking me and says, you got to lean. So I said, why do you have to lean? He says, because you have to be free. You have to be free. You know. And I'll never forget. So I said, I don't feel very free when you're knocking me in my head like that. So it always remained with me. He was imposing on me to be free. It felt more like Pare than like Moshe. Now, as I grew up older, I understood. I once told him this. I said, listen, you hit me in my head when I was a kid. Now is my time to get even. Anyway, he laughed. He was also doing it, not because he was exactly feeling free. He was trained that you're lean, you're free. So he's not going to be free. The point is, many of us just do things by rote, mechanically. We don't think what we're doing. Had he told me, a message about freedom, made me feel free, and then say one of the ways we do it is by leaning, it would have been a whole different story. Now, trust me, I did not need to go to therapy over this one. But I could imagine someone who has a lot of that, inundated their whole life with that, can be quite problematic. The point I'm making here is that Judaism is not just to be done mechanically. Mitzvahs anoshim ulamoda. Judaism has a soul to it. There's a reason for it. But there are times we do things automatic pilot. But the goal is that you should be cognizant of it. So a person can be, as I said, an astronaut dressed in the right garments, doing everything right, but they're lost. They have no idea they're on a mission. Then there are other people who are on a mission and they just don't know how to dress for the mission. That's another story. So you need to bring both worlds together, obviously. So there's much beauty in Jewish ritual and tradition. But the beauty of tradition and ritual is not just some ritual as an end in itself. It's part of the process of being aware of God. Why do we wear a kippah, a yarmulke? It's not even a law to wear a yarmulke. Times of the Talmud, not necessarily everybody wore yarmulke all the time. I'm not minimizing, but today it became a symbol. Wearing a yarmulke for some people, we'll see that much more than not eating kosher or not keeping Shabbos. The truth is, Shabbos and kosher are laws in the Torah itself. The Torah nowhere does it say about a yarmulke. It's a custom, but it became a custom and a symbolic one. It's a reminder that there's a God above us. It's like respect. But how many people wearing a yarmulke feel respect for God all the time? They don't, because it becomes machine-like. It becomes like robotic. I speak for myself. But then I think about it. I say, yarmulke, yeah. It reminds me. They tell the story of Bialik, the great writer and poet, who, in Israel. So he's once going in Mea Shearim. Mea Shearim, as you know, is one of the bastions of a very frum community. Ultra-Orthodox, as the New York Times would remind us. And he's walking in the street, and he sees one of the Yerushalmi kids, a little boy, with payas and the whole thing, and says to him, Ingela, wo is a shul? A little boy, where's the shul? Where's the synagogue? He spoke fluent Yiddish. So the little boy says to him, a shul is nicht for goyim, not for Yidden. A shul is not for Gentiles, it's only for Jews. So he says to him, Vana vest as ich ma goy? Ich nicht genid. Man, they're talking fluent Yiddish. Okay, fine. So he says, well, du gehst on a yarmulke, on a kippah, or kippah. Bialik was going without a yarmulke. He was going to act, no, I will translate. He says, because you're going without a head covering. So you're not Jewish. That's what the child thought. Now Bialik was going to a shul to say Kaddish for his father. Okay, fine. But this child, so Bialik says to him, Ingela, little boy, Kippus HaShamayim, the whole heaven is my yarmulke. So the little boy, who's a sharp kid, says to him, in his innocence, he says, Zu greis a yarmulke for za kleine Kopf. Meaning, too big of a yarmulke for such a small head. So the boy probably didn't even realize what he was saying, but he said it right, Because yes, of course, all of heaven and the whole world is God's presence. But we are small people, and you need something to remind you on your terms, not just... I thought it's a beautiful story. So, a yarmulke is about awareness. Now, a mezuzah is also the same thing. A mezuzah on the door. So it says that you should remember. Tzitzis is about remembering. How many mitzvahs it talks about? Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Do you know how many mitzvahs, traditions in Judaism is all about remembering? Remembering there's a God. Because in this world it's very easy to forget. And it doesn't matter how religious you look or how ritualistic you are. We're talking about conscious remembering, not mechanical, just doing things. And the more you do so, the more you sense that sense of mission. So, sadly, we live in a bizarre world, and you have people, as I said, dressed like astronauts but don't behave like us, and some that dress like they're on the beach, but they behave like astronauts, meaning they feel they're on a mission. So it's a crazy world we live in. But the mission, the goal is for us to wake ourselves up. To wake ourselves up. And Elokeinu means to be my God. A God that's my life. That my daily life, how I breathe, how I walk, I talk, is cognizant, is awareness of that higher presence. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai already bemoaned the fact, even in his time. Imagine how much more so today, that how difficult it is. Much more, we are much more accountable to the ones that are around us, to people around us. So accountability is a gift. But it's a gift that's predicated on knowing that you're here for a reason. When you're here for a reason, then you should be begging to be accountable. You want to know, what's my mission today? And what is it tomorrow? And have I lived up to it? Is my soul expressing itself? Because at the end of the day, it's your potential that's at stake. If your potential is not being actualized, you sure want to be accountable and figure out why. But that takes, as I said, discipline and takes work. It takes a shift. A mind shift. So, you want to give me a reminder of where we're at? So my dear friends, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and also online, this week's chapter gives us strength to start thinking about our mission. The mission is to build a temple of your life. To take your gold, silver, and copper, the materials that you were blessed with, the gifts you were blessed with, and sanctify it. Turn your home into a temple, to a sanctuary. your table into an altar. People come to your home, they should feel a sense of spirituality, of refinement, of giving. Not just a museum, not just a beautiful physical home, but a home of warmth. I know someone who grew up in a palace. She always reminds me, she says it was a gilded prison. That's what it was. A prison made out of gold. It was not a home. My mother was never home. My father was never home. We had no warmth. Yes, I had 100 maids and 300 bedrooms and horses and everything. But we had no home. So God should bless us all to build homes. A home is a mini sanctuary, a mishkan, where the home is a place where there's love. People come into your doors, feel kindness, feel this is a home I'd like to build. Greatest compliment someone can give you is, I'd like to build a home like your home. Unfortunately, especially in New York, some people don't even know what a home is. Some people are afraid to even eat at home one night because who knows? So they're always outside. Building a home is building a sanctuary, and then you want to be accountable, because what's not accountability? It's like saying, how much more love can I give? When you love somebody, you want to be accountable to them. Imagine you love somebody and they love you, and you get lost, and they forget about you. You come home, they forget that you were gone for 3 days. How does that feel? Or someone says, I was worried about you. I couldn't sleep. Where were you? That type of accountability is a gift. Somebody cares enough that you should be accountable to them. Now, I know we live in a world where people rather say, I'd rather be able to do whatever I want than come home and my partner doesn't even notice. I don't know if that's such a great blessing. It means that their love is missing. When there's real love, you want to know. Your child comes a little late. Where's your child? You want to care about your child. It's out of love that you want to know, and you want to be accountable to those that love you. So it's a different way of looking at life, and I bless you all to have people in your life that do think about you, even when you're not thinking about them, and that you should want to be accountable to them out of love, not out of obligation, not because you have to report to them where you are. It's because you want to tell them where you are. Share your life with somebody. So Eila Pekudei HaMishkan teaches us the power of accountability, the gift of accountability, the blessing of it, not as a burden but as a gift. When you offer somebody 100 pounds of stones and say, carry it from here to here, and then it's yours, you'll say, what do I need it for? It's a burden to schlep 100 pounds. But if someone offers you 100 pounds of diamonds, you're not going to say it's a burden. You're going to say, give me 200 pounds. Now, 100 pounds of stones don't weigh more than 100 pounds of diamonds, but 100 pounds of diamonds, the value makes you want to do it. So it's not that we're afraid of accountability or responsibility or carrying things. Show us the reward, the value, then it's worth it. When you realize accountability is a byproduct of mission, then it becomes a gift, and you embrace it. So may God bless us all to do the right cheshbon hanefesh every night. The custom is before you go to sleep, just like when you wake up in the morning, you say Moda'ani. Before you go to sleep, you make a little accounting. What did I do with my day today? At the end of the prayer, we say, B'yotcha afkid ruchi. In your hands, in your arms, I entrust. Afkid. Similar to Pekudei, actually. I account for and I entrust you with my soul, with my spirit. You shall redeem me. So you go to sleep with an accountability for the day. And obviously with the prayer that tomorrow morning will be better than the day before. So, being that we're getting close to that time period, I don't know what your curfew is like. Maybe for some of you the night is yet young. But at some point your soul will be put to rest, for the night. So think about it in that type of accountable way. And God should bless us all to discover that mission and to answer to it and to make that unique, indispensable contribution that only you and only you are capable of. So thank you very much. It's an honor to share a few words with you all. And I want to say is that Philip will be giving his class tomorrow night. I'm not sure. Check with us if you're interested in that class. We are here next Wednesday, and ongoing. I'll be doing soon some pre-Passover classes. And in general, please see me and the Meaningful Life Center as a resource. We're here for you in every possible way. If you have not left your email address, please do so we can stay in touch. And any other way we can help you, please let me know. Again, it's been an honor. Thank you so much.